There were people outside her house cursing and yelling and calling her the B word and the N word, and just, I mean, it was bizarre.
She's the district attorney in the county of Fulton in Georgia. If people were surrounding her house, disturbing the peace and screaming hateful things at her, don't you think maybe she would have prosecuted them? Don't you? Now, on Thursday, you and I, we had a pretty fun time with the insanity down at Fulton County, Georgia. This was the hearing involving Fani Willis and her boy toy there, making hundreds of millions of dollars on the prosecution of Donald Trump. And I mean, the testimony was bonkers. It was off the rails. It was insane. It was Looney Tunes. And regardless of how the judge comes back with his decision in this case, whether he decides that there is, by the way, the bar is so low here. All the judge has to agree to is that there is an appearance of conflict between the district attorney and the appointment of the special prosecutor, and he can remove the district attorney from the case. Just the appearance of conflict. I mean, isn't it without any reasonable doubt that there is at the very least the appearance of a conflict here? I would go so far as to say there is an actual and real conflict here. But regardless of what the judge points out here and decides, the most important thing that the American people and voters have been able to see is that the entire 2024 presidential election right now is at the mercy of this insane woman, the district attorney of Fulton County, with her behavior, with her ridiculous, corrupt behavior. And she is tinkering with your choice for president by utilizing this unprecedented use of criminal justice against a presidential candidate and former president. It's never been done before. And she is obviously trying to keep Donald Trump from being, actually, I shouldn't even put it that way. This has nothing to do with Donald Trump being president. This has to do with you being able to vote for Donald Trump for president. She's violating your rights. So we saw all that on Thursday, and we had a pretty fun party with it. And we thought we'd seen it all. And then came Friday. John Floyd, the father of Fani Willis, was asked to testify under oath because, there were a couple of things there when Fani was asked, like about, why do you keep so much cash in the house? And she would just say, well, that's what my dad taught me. So they decided to cross-examine Mr. Floyd. And here are a couple of little tidbits.
After she was sworn in on January 1 of 2021. And on or about the 3rd of February, at probably 5:30 a.m. in the morning, there were people outside her house cursing and yelling and calling her the B word and the N word, and just, I mean, it was bizarre. Okay, I mean,
yeah, it's bizarre, all right. You know what's also bizarre? That there's no police report about this. That there's no footage of this. I mean, for God's sake, we have footage of Jussie Smollett hanging out with the two Nigerian brothers at 2 a.m. in Chicago with the Subway sandwich. If we don't have footage of this scene, nobody on the block thought to take video of it and post it on their social media. This just happened in a vacuum here. Right? He made a similar claim a little later, and then we'll sort of give you context as to who John Floyd is and what might really be at play here.
A house that my daughter had worked for. It was a brand new house. She's the only one who would ever live there. It's a 4-bedroom, brand new house. And somebody needed to protect the house. And I stayed there to basically take care of the house, to take care of the yard, to take care of that. Also, somebody sprayed, again, the B word and the N word on the house. And I don't think my daughter even knew that. I cleaned it off and called the police, and South Fulton police. They have, I'm sure, all the records of all the things.
Yeah, we should take a look at those records. I think that would be really interesting to see. So we have vandalism there too. Boy, Atlanta is a super racist place. It's like MAGA country, right? Jussie Smollett. That's what we're seeing here. And forgive me for not believing John Floyd, but let's just take a quick walk through history to tell you who John Floyd is. John Floyd is a former member of the Black Panther political party in Los Angeles. That's where Fani was born, in Inglewood, California. He was a close associate of Angela Davis back in the late 60s, early 70s. She, of course, ended up as the first woman ranked in the FBI's top 10 most wanted. She's a terrorist, Angela Davis is, but of course, a righteous racial justice terrorist. So I guess that's okay. So, of course, when he testifies, he was going to have to play that card as much as possible. Give me a break. Let me ask you something. After seeing Fani Willis on the stand last week, and after seeing video of her and her entire political career so far as a district attorney, and the show that she has made about criminal justice system and about the so-called systemic racism and Black Lives Matters and the cops are the problem and all the things that she has said, everything that she said on the stand last week, do you think in your wildest dreams, do you think that on the night she was sworn in as district attorney, her home was surrounded by rabid, angry, hateful racists screaming profanities at her and racial slurs at her? Do you think for a second she would not have mentioned that at this point over the course of the last 2+ years? Do you think for a moment she would not have mentioned that in one of her multiple cable news and broadcast news appearances? Do you think for a second that she would not have called those cameras to her home the night that she was sworn in to give an impromptu press conference? Also, by the way, she's the district attorney in the county of Fulton in Georgia. If people were surrounding her house, disturbing the peace and screaming hateful things at her, don't you think maybe she would have prosecuted them? Don't you? And yet there's no record of any of this, any of it at all. All we have to confirm that it actually happened is the good word of her dad, John Floyd, a former member of the Black Panther Party. So I guess it's up to us then to dissect John Floyd, take a look at his character, his values, his principles, and his demeanor on the stand so we can evaluate whether he would ever lie or tell tall tales or even exaggerate something, right? Because if he's a pretty straight shooter and just gives sober, just the facts, ma'am, kind of testimony, then maybe we will believe him about the rabid, frothing, screaming, eyes bulging, racist mob attacking his daughter's home the night that she was sworn in. So let's take a look at more of John Floyd, shall we, and see how credible he might be.
I may be wrong, but I believe COVID hit in 2020. So I was asking about 2019. In 2019, did you spend any time in California?
Before COVID was even here in the United States, remember I lived in South Africa and I've traveled the world. I knew COVID was coming before. I knew COVID was around before. They may have announced it in 20, but in fact, I knew about it and I knew what was happening in 19.
The context of this question, by the way, is he was asked, did you go to California at all in 2019? And he said, no, because of COVID. And the lawyer's like, well, now wait a minute. We didn't really know anything about COVID until 2020, and the lockdown didn't happen until mid to late March. So, and his answer was, oh, I knew about it before everybody else. After all, I used to live in South Africa. What, does Fauci know this guy? Did they work together at all? Why wasn't this guy on the task force, by the way? If he knew about it, why didn't he say anything? I might have believed him. John Floyd, Fani Willis's father, knew about COVID before anyone else in America did. Because after all, he used to live in South Africa. I hope you're paying attention. All right, so I'll be honest, that might sort of shoot a hole into his credibility a little bit here, but I'm sure that's a one-off. I'm sure that there are other instances where John Floyd shows himself to be an incredibly trustworthy and believable witness.
You know where she moved to? No, and I didn't want to know. I intentionally did not want to know because I was not, if somebody stuck a gun to my head and I could tell them, I wasn't going to tell them anyway. I'd have made up something, but I didn't want to know.
Okay, so would it be fair to say that if you didn't want to know, you never visited her at the place that she moved to?
Oh, I never did. Never did.
I just again, I don't think there's any commentary needed here. I just want to reiterate. John Floyd claims that he did not know where his daughter ended up moving to and didn't want to know, just in case somebody came and held a gun to his head and demanded to know where his daughter lived. All right, let's move on. But wait, I can't move on. What the hell is going on in Fulton County, Georgia? What the hell is happening here? Is Fani Willis really in such grave danger? I had no idea. What is going on in this guy's head? Oh, I do love the fact I didn't want her to tell me just in case someone put a gun to my head and forced me to tell them where she lived, although I would have made up a place anyway. Well, if you would have made up a place anyway, what's wrong with knowing where your daughter lived? All right, and then there's this. The biggest question had to do with Fani Willis keeping upwards to $15,000 of cash in her home. And she said it was on the advice of her father.
When your daughter moved or left the house that she owned, did she say anything to you about having a large savings of cash?
Oh, no, no. See, maybe, excuse me, and Your Honor, I'm not trying to be racist, okay? But it's a black thing, okay? I was trained, and most black folks, they hide cash or they keep cash. And I trained, you always keep some cash because I've been places, and just because of the color of my skin, for example, I took a fellowship at Harvard when my daughter was just if I might, Your Honor, when I was just, she was just, maybe 3 years old. And I remember going to a restaurant in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I had a American Express credit card and maybe a Visa or whatever. And I had a lot of what they call traveler's checks. I don't even know if they still have traveler's checks, but traveler's checks. And there was a sign said, with the credit card, for whatever reasons, the man would not take my American Express credit card. So I pulled out my Visa card, and he wouldn't take my Visa card. So then I pulled out my traveler's checks. He said, we don't take checks. Now, these were traveler's checks. This was money. I had a $10 bill. I'll never forget this as long as I live. And he said, the bill for my wife at the time, Fani's mother, Fani, and myself was like $9.95, and I had a $10 bill. That was all that. I always remember that. But even before that, I've always kept cash, and I've told my daughter, you keep 6 months worth of cash always. For example, I had 3 safes in my house. I put some of my clients' stuff there too, things I didn't want other lawyers to be, because you're always in a firm, and I knew that there were special conditions. So some of my clients' things I would bring home, put them in the safe. But I've always kept safes. And as a matter of fact, I gave my daughter her first cash box and told her always keep some cash.
Well, that's what a heartwarming story. Never forget when I gave my daughter her first cash box so she can keep a stash of $15,000 in her home. If the real takeaway from that entire story there is that the liberals who live in Cambridge, Massachusetts are all racist, I'm buying it, actually. After everything that we've learned about Cambridge and Harvard, you know what? I tend to believe that part of it. Because what business owner wants to take somebody's American Express card or traveler's check, right? So let me get this straight. He found a racist restaurant owner in Cambridge, Massachusetts when he was going to Harvard who would only take cash from him. And so therefore, he advised his daughter to keep $15,000 in her house at all times. Because, I mean, it's one thing to say you should always, carry some 20s around, maybe 100 or two, just in case. Some walking around money, as it were. It's a pretty big freaking leap from $10 covered my restaurant bill in Cambridge 40 years ago to keep 15 grand under the bed. By the way crime is right now in Fulton County, thanks to his daughter, the DA, I wouldn't be keeping much cash around the house. Because that house getting busted into, you know what I'm saying? All right, there's got to be something redeeming here about this man's testimony. Maybe it's this.
Did you talk about any of the testimony from yesterday or watching news reports or anything like that?
Oh, absolutely. You can't cut the TV on without seeing this. The first thing, and I listen to conservative radio a lot, and last night for 5 hours, all they talked about was this case.
So you were aware of what the testimony your daughter gave yesterday was?
Yeah, unless you don't cut the radio on, unless you don't cut the television on, unless you don't read the AJC or any other, the New York Times or whatever, which I do every day, of course.
So is it fair to say nobody instructed you that you were under the rule of sequestration?
Right, and I'm not under subpoena either.
So in other words, of course, my testimony is going to match whatever was asked and answered yesterday. Of course I was watching. But that whole thing about listening to conservative radio all day, I knew there was something about this guy I liked. Everyone has some redeeming value. Maybe he's a fan. Maybe he listens all the time. I wish wouldn't it have been great if he name-dropped Town Hall? Well, of course I knew what happened at the testimony. I watched Larry over there at Rumble every day at noon. That would have been beautiful. That would have been absolutely beautiful. All right, good on you. I wonder if he's listening right now. Hey, John, how's it going? See, here's the thing. I try to be a positive guy. I try to find how I can make amends with anybody that I might disagree with. I want to reconcile as much as possible. We got to come together. So there you go. John Floyd and I can come together over his love of conservative talk radio. And now let's see with his daughter. Maybe there's something that she and I have in common.
He likes wine. I don't really like wine, to be honest with you. I like Grey Goose.
Now you're talking. I mean, I'm not going to turn down a nice bottle of wine either. But if Fani, John, and I can get together, listen to some old-time Rush Limbaugh classics, and suck down some Grey Goose martinis, I think before the night is over, we'll solve all this country's problems. Let me remind you, these are the people who have the 2024 presidential election in their hands. They're deciding who you get to vote for. They're deciding if you are allowed to vote for Donald Trump. Let that sink in.